Welcome everyone to the monthly Mode Shift Omaha member meeting. Really excited to have Senator McKinney here and board member Kimara Snipes to talk about ARPA funds. So we will I'll probably just turn it over to Kimara to get us started.
Well, hello everyone. Kimara Snipes, I'm a Mode Shift board member. And I guess just before we get started, a little bit of background. As the conversation started to be had around what Senator McKinney and Senator Wayne, and just another shout out to Senator McKinney and Senator Wayne for the hard, and I know taxing work that they have done and are still doing when it comes to the ARPA funding that is coming into East Omaha, or North and South Omaha, as some people might say. The state legislature put together a special committee, and Senator McKinney, please stop me if I get anything wrong, but they put together a special committee who issued an RFP to select, eventually it was Olson Associates. And what really got my attention was, as I read the RFP, it talks significantly about how whomever was chosen to survey and create criteria to evaluate project ideas and things like that, that they were responsible for gathering input from impacted communities, neighborhoods, and stakeholders. And I always wonder what people mean when they say stakeholders. And I was appreciative of the fact that they put in their neighborhoods and impacted communities. So because of that, got me to really thinking about how the money would be spent, especially since it's supposed to go towards really long-term transformational sort of projects. I know that we here at Mode Shift focus on transportation and alternative modes of transportation and different things like that. And so we just thought it'd be a good idea to just like have a discussion tonight, maybe about the background of this, what Senator McKinney hopes can come from this for the community. And I guess we can like even open up for some questions and things like that. So Senator, just thank you for taking time to be here, because again, we know that you are really, really busy, but as long as I've known you, and I've known Senator McKinney for a while, I have to stop myself because I always call him Terrell, but I want to give him the proper respect. He's always been someone, you know, who shows up and you know, he's a coach at North, you know, coaching wrestling and doing all these things that just everyday people like all of us do. And he doesn't seem disconnected. He doesn't seem like he can't be approached. And so I just want to thank you again for being here. I know we all do, and we can just start a conversation. I'll pass the virtual mic to you.
No problem. Thank you, Kimara, for inviting me. Thank you, Mode Shift and Mode Shift members, for having me on as well. I'm excited for the conversation. As Kimara said, LB 1024, you know, is the North and South Omaha Economic Recovery Plan. It's something that soon as session ended, not this past session, but last session, me and Senator Wayne, we began to get together to try to understand the rules around ARPA and see and try to craft a plan to, you know, assist our districts as much as possible. We probably one of a handful of senators that sat down and actually met frequently and tried to better understand the rules and what was coming from the feds to see how could we make it work. And that's how we initially came up with the North Omaha Recovery Plan. But once the session occurred, we added on South Omaha because it was just, you know, right in a sense of, you know, making it work and not trying to not include anybody. So we were openly willing to, you know, do what we can to assist South Omaha as well, because, you know, as Kimmer always say, East Omaha is East Omaha. So, you know, as a kid, I lived in South Omaha, so I know what it's like to live over there. So up to now, so session ended, we did an RFP. We put an RFP for a master developer to assist us in doing a plan. We got a handful of applications or RFPs, And Olsen stood out from the rest of them. I would say that they were the only ones that, you know, had a lot of diversity, had willingness to engage with the community. Some people were just trying to do virtual meetings. They, you know, have been open to feedback from us. You know, if we see something that they say, hey, we're gonna go this route, they don't, you know, not listen to us when we give suggestions and things like that. We did that. They went through a process of, you know, gathering data about both North and South Omaha to have some understandings. And then we had stakeholder workshops for them to give the get feedback based on the data that they were able to gather. Because what they said was, okay, we didn't grow up in North and South Omaha. So yeah, we have all this data and this is what the data suggests, but we want to get in a room with stakeholders from those communities to get a better understanding of what the data is. And so both communities could tell us whether the data is correct, what could they fix, and what will work. And the reason for that is so we can craft, you know, the right application and criteria for individuals that are seeking to get some funding. And that was the reason for the stakeholder meetings. It wasn't to not include the public as a whole. It was more so a step to make sure that once the conversation was open to the community, it wasn't a failed conversation and it was done in the best way possible. I know people still have concerns, and I'm not going to say the process as a whole has been perfect. I won't say that, but I would say, you know, me, for example, I would say I've been trying to do all I can. Anytime I hear a concern, I'm saying, hey, people are talking about this. Hey, somebody's asking about this, because I think that's what's needed is, yeah, we can't always say, hey, we're going to take your feedback, but what are we going to do after we take your feedback? And I would tell you, if it was a concern somebody said to me when they reached out, I've said it in group meetings the next time we met, like, hey, people are talking about this. How are we going to address this? How are we going to address that? So beginning the week of the 19th, we're going to have some public hearings, 2 in South Omaha and 2 in North Omaha. It's an opportunity for the public to, one, come and get a better understanding of, you know, what is needed to even be able to be considered for some of the funds, but also for them to also present ideas to us and to the committee. Olsen will also have people there that will assist people to help them get some understanding of whether they project even qualify. So that'll be a big thing. The announcement on that will be out soon, hopefully, if not tomorrow, Friday.
For the meetings,
Yes.
it actually came out today. It was on the news today. So September 19th and 20th, at the Metropolitan Community College South Campus on the 19th at 11 a.m. and the 20th at 5 p.m. And then September 21st and 22nd in North Omaha. The one on the 21st at 5 p.m. at the TAC building, OPS. And then on the 22nd at Metropolitan Community College, the Fort Campus at 11 a.m.
Okay, I didn't know they sent it out yet, so I didn't want to get ahead of them. But since they sent it out, yeah, South Omaha will start on the 19th at the South Metro campus, and then beginning on the 21st, the first meeting in North Omaha will be at the TAC building at 5. It's 5 p.m., right? And then the next day at 11 at Metro Community College.
The 19th at 11, the 20th at 5 over South, the 21st at 5, and then the 22nd at 11. I kind of heard you, but I was also looking through some of this data.
But if you guys, you know, if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer. I would tell you our approach to this has been to approach the recovery in North and South Omaha from an economic lens. The reason why, and I would tell you, just being frank, as somebody that grew up in Omaha or North Omaha, for my lifetime, the focus has always been let's throw millions of dollars at programs and give money to organizations to run a bunch of programs to address hunger, address poverty, address unemployment, and those type of things. And me just being frank, I don't think it's worked. When you look at the data, it hasn't worked. So with this plan, we're attempting to take an economic focus and find ways to boost economic growth within North and South Omaha, because at the end of the day, a program is good, but if I'm only making $9 an hour and I went to a program, how does that help me? We want to try to lift people out of poverty as much as possible. We won't save everybody, and everybody will never be saved, and money or dollars don't solve everything. But I strongly believe if we begin to decrease poverty in both North and South Omaha, we will see a change in educational outcomes, life expectancy, a reduction of individuals going in and out of the criminal justice system, and those type of things.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the process that's happening right now with Olson and developing criteria? And then also, well, let's start off there. And you might not, I'm not sure, but I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that process and how they're developing criteria right now to use to evaluate projects.
So for the development of the criteria, they kind of took feedback from, us as far as once the plan was introduced, as far as saying, we want to take an economic approach and we want to make sure each project has some transformational change, some economic impact, and some, long lasting growth. So that was the start. Then what they took the data and looked at the data and said, okay, this is what the data says. We did the stakeholder meetings, and they took all that feedback and those ideas from those meetings. And also, they also looked across the country at what are other people doing when they're asking for project proposals from community, what type of criteria is being used, and that's how it's been developed.
Okay, so as you know, we're Mode Shift is an organization really based around transportation. And just for some more information for everyone within the group, the meetings that were had in North and South Omaha for community organizations, during those 2 days, I went to the meetings in North and South Omaha. I just kind of want to tell you what happened during those meetings. Of course, both times they had introductions. We got to hear from our state senators, heard a little bit about the airport project and the affordable housing project, because money has already been appropriated. I think about 80 million for those projects, 60 for the airport and 20 for affordable housing. Olson Associates did a SWOT analysis of North and South Omaha, and I have paper copies of both, and I'm happy to try to get pictures. I don't know where to get electronic copies, but when I find out, I will share them. But they did a SWOT analysis of North and South Omaha, and they looked at things like land use, community resources and redevelopment, transportation and connectivity, natural environment and community health, utility infrastructure, demographics, workforce and housing, real estate market. They also did an overall summary. So really part of what we wanted to do today, because we know that you all are going to be getting project ideas and things like that. Clearly, transportation is something that is important. It was part of the data that was collected. It came up in conversations in North and South Omaha around transportation. I'm wondering from the group, do you have any thoughts? Do you have any questions? Senator, are there ways that you can see, I'm sorry, just heard my son call me. I'm sorry. Anyway, that really threw me off. He never calls me. Anything that comes to your mind when it comes to transportation that maybe would benefit the community economically? I can think of some things, but I'd like to hear from you and even from other people in the group. This isn't just like a Kimara show. I would love to know if you have any questions for the senator around transportation as well, because this is a good time and a good space for one, brainstorming, but also we have, you know, kind of an in right now with Senator McKinney being here, who's willing to listen to us as this process continues.
When I think about transportation and how can it help economically, the number one thing is how do we make sure our constituents can get to, you know, jobs. You know, the bus system in our city isn't the greatest. And that's one of the reasons why we want to develop around the airport, because we know although all that development is happening in Sarpy County and in Gretna, it's hard to get out there. And even with thinking about, you know, these plans, we've talked about, okay, if we do something, is it going to be close to a bus route? What does the walkability look like? Or during some of the data that, you know, Olson was able to gather, we had conversations about where do you get the data to figure out what streets are walkable and not walkable? Because I could tell you off my head, when we talked about certain streets, I automatically thinking, you know, there's sidewalks, but a portion of these streets, you have to walk in the street. And we have to think about that. So I would say, you know, yes, transformational, all this matters, but what matters is, are people going to be able to get to these places? How are we going to make sure, you know, if somebody it has to catch the bus, is it accessible? Can they get there? Do they have to? Because I remember being a kid, is some bus stops you got to walk over a mound of snow just to get inside the bus because the streets aren't plowed or and those type of things. So, and also another thing that isn't technically a part of LB 1024, but it was a part of ARPA, and it was it wasn't part of ARPA, it was part of infrastructure, but it also was a part of the IRA bill, I believe. There's money from the feds to reconnect communities that were affected by the interstate system. And it's called Reconnect. It's a Reconnect grant. And it's something we've talked about, because one of the things I want to do, and I'm hopeful our DOT will get on board one day, is to reconnect North Omaha because of the highway system and do something there. But we'll see if that happens. But as far as mobility and, you know, access and transportation, that's something we've talked about, because we do understand that our public transportation system isn't the best, and we've been trying to brainstorm ways to, you know, do what we can to make it better.
Well, as someone who just got the bus not too long ago, I'm happy to help you brainstorm on that, because you are right. It is pretty horrible. You know, we do have a walkability team here at Mode Shift, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I know Clyde is here. Do you have any thoughts when it comes to walkability and what the senator has been talking about, especially with this funding coming in, as far as, you know, anything that could be done?
Well, one of the problems we see a lot in, like I was working on a study with Omaha Together One Community, the area on the southwest side of Miller Park. We had just had a fatality there last spring. And the problem we have is on a lot of our older boulevards, if there's sidewalks there, they're what they call curb walks. They're narrow and they're right adjacent to the curb, and they get filled up with snow and ice in the winter, and they're even hazardous to walk on this time of the year because of the high speed and all that industrial traffic on like 30th Street, which is also US 75. So if we could use some of this funds to one, fill gaps in the missing sidewalks, and then try to get the sidewalks moved further away from the curb so that they don't get covered with snow in the winter. And a good example of where, and we've been trying to get the city when we got new developments, like where the King Kong restaurant and then a new hotel is on the south side of Dodge, just east of Saddle Creek. You'll notice that if you drive by there, that there's a 7-foot grassy area and then the sidewalk, but it only extends for a block. And that's really what we should have all over the city is, and if we can help fund getting rid of curb walks and also areas where there's no sidewalks and get sidewalks built to those standards. And by the way, those sidewalks are 6 to 7 feet wide, the new ones.
Okay, and I think that's a good idea. I would say one thing to think about when you talk about redoing sidewalks or developing sidewalks, because we're taking an economic approach to this, we don't want to just say, hey, here's a chunk of money, go fix the sidewalks. What we're looking at is, okay, if we're going to improve the sidewalks, who from North and South Omaha are going to work on these jobs? And that's the big thing, because that's what we don't want to see is we put out a bunch of money, but the people that are benefiting from these dollars are not from our communities. And I don't know the process, but I would say if we have to go through a bid process with the city, that's going to be problematic because it's already problematic for smaller contractors from North and South Omaha to get access to some of those bids. So it's a great idea. I wouldn't say it's not, but the one thing that we're gonna have to kind of walk a fine line of being really intentional about that, because what we don't want to do is just throw dollars at anything. Because for example, in the money, we want to do affordable housing, but affordable housing is the end goal. The reason it's the end goal is because we want to utilize dollars for affordable housing to build capacity and build up our local contractors. We just don't want to put money out and say, let's go build 50 houses. That's easy. But what's not easy is building 50 houses and making sure that local contractors are able to benefit. Maybe they can't do everything, but we have to be intentional about that. But I mean, if there was a proposal sent to us and it took that approach of being intentional and being, economic focus as far as making sure that, yeah, we're improving the sidewalks, but who are the workers improving the sidewalks? That's the biggest thing.
Mhm. Anyone else have any thoughts around what the senator is saying?
Yeah, I kind of have a thought on that. This is Michael, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you talk about benefiting local Omaha contractors, that makes me think of a time when I worked for Northrop Grumman. I actually worked for a subcontractor. And so we were doing work for the government, and they require their contracts to have a certain percentage of minority-owned, Black-owned, women-owned businesses. So although the winner of the project was Northrop Grumman, or name any of the other ones, Lockheed Martin or whatever, there were a host of other subcontractors like McKinney and Associates, which was local, and well, I'm trying to think of the other ones. Well, Tech Systems, but they're not local. Point being, there was this requirement to have that. And so that seems like that could be a policy, right? And if we could get something like that to go through Nebraska and say, hey, when we're going to build new things, we have a policy that states that you can't just go ahead and use all big name people. You have to use a certain percentage of women-owned, Black-owned, minority-owned businesses.
No, I think that's a good idea. One thing is that we deal with in Nebraska is we don't have affirmative action, so we have to wordsmith everything. But the good thing about a lot of the ARPA dollars is it's federal money, so we can be more intentional, but it's still walking a fine line because we still have to go to the legislature and get them. Although the money is there, we still got to get it completely appropriated. And because of what the legislature is and what people have been attaching to words and rallying behind, we have to tread a little lightly on being intentional but not being intentional in a sense that it's going to raise a lot of chaos, if you get what I'm
Right, that
saying.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a quick comment. This is Jacqueline. I know, so we have multiple markets within the United States, and I mean, I'm born and raised in Nebraska, but I know Missouri, they give rebates to minority and women-owned businesses as far as contracts. I don't know if that's any kind of possibility in Nebraska. And the state actually demands it of our company down there. We have to have a certain percentage of business that is done with minority or women-owned business.
Yeah, here it's a lot more tricky because of
No go.
Yeah, if you recall a few years ago, it was on the ballot. They actually got rid of affirmative action in the state of Nebraska. And so because of that, that's the reason why Senator McKinney was saying, now it has to be wordsmith. You can't say, Black owned business or minority owned. It has to be like small and emerging business and different things like that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
No, this is great conversation though. Definitely something to think about in the future for other organizations who coalition build and movement building and things like that. I was wondering, does anyone else have a question? I was wondering, Senator, if you could talk a little bit more about the Reconnect funds and maybe highlight some of the history of like Highway 75 and how that's been duplicated across the country, and then maybe talk about the Reconnect funds a little bit.
So Highway 75, is similar to a lot of, inner city communities where the interstate system was ran through those communities, which one divided those communities, displaced a lot of people, and kind of drained those communities of any economic vitality. But recently, the feds and people in Congress have been willing to step up and put some money on the table because there's been a lot of other projects across the country. You look at Dallas, Rochester, New York, St. Paul, Minnesota. It's kind of where I initially got the idea from. Is I was on YouTube one day and it was like, hey, it's this community in Minnesota doing something to reconnect their community because of the interstate system. So I went and looked at it, and what they're trying to do is pretty much build, it's called like a deck over the interstate, which reconnects the community. And you have, I believe, a few options. You could just do a pure green space. You could build on top of it, or you could do a mix of both. Each costs a different amount, but in the infrastructure bill, there was $1 billion for the Reconnect grant, and in the I believe the Inflation Reduction Act, there's another $3 billion. It's either in the CHIPS or the IRA. It's in one of those. And what I've been trying to do is get our Department of Transportation on board, or somebody on board, to go, apply for the grant. Let's reconnect the community. I mean, some places have just got rid of the interstate system in that area. Some have built over the top of it or did a tunnel system to make it work. But I think it's something that definitely should be explored. And also because North and South Omaha is landlocked, you can't grow too many other places. But if you were able to build over the top of the interstate system, that opens up more land for those communities, which can help economically.
So I got a quick question. Two questions. When is that grant application due? And then the other one is, what are your thoughts just generally? I know it's like kind of a deep question, but taking out the highway versus capping it.
So I gotta double check to see when a grant is due, but I think DOT has to apply.
Oh,
That's why I'm saying we have to get them on board, or the city or somebody.
like,
But also,
sorry, I was just gonna say like maybe MAPA too.
yeah, maybe MAPA.
Okay.
I would be okay with tearing it out. I only said the deck part because some people are like, okay, what are you gonna do about the traffic there? But there's been studies shown that the traffic on 75 north isn't the greatest compared to like Dodge Street or something. Yes, there's traffic, but it's not, diverting it wouldn't be like a wild idea.
Okay. I'm wondering, and this is more so for Mode Shift members and board members and whatnot, or even Senator McKinney, you know, we are an organization that we advocate as well. I don't know if we as an organization can be supportive, even if it's writing letters or whatever, but you know, that might be a conversation. I have to talk to Liz about it, but I'm just wondering because it sounds like a good idea. I'm seeing people come onto video. So if you have questions or anything, please jump in. Please jump in at any time. I was also wondering, outside of ARPA, has there been much conversation, or what kind of conversation has been happening at the state level when it does come to transportation?
You know, it hasn't been a lot necessarily. I know, but there has been conversations with other senators about finding a way to connect Western Nebraska more to Eastern Nebraska. Conversations about doing something, some type of, I don't know if it would be like some type of rail system from Lincoln to Omaha to make that a better situation. And just trying to think of, because we have a lot of 2-lane highways, how can we expand those? Those been conversations, not necessarily legislation, but I've had conversations with other people in the body about just different brainstorming ideas.
Ryan, yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was working on this grant we got from Spin, the scooter folks, that gave us access to some big data derived tools that use cell phone trips to track who's getting around the city how. And one of the things we pulled before it ran out was information on the travelers through the 75 North versus where it goes through South Omaha and the West Overpass, with the idea that in the future we'd be able to look at the disparities in who's benefiting from using those roads versus who's being exposed to the pollution. It also has data on where the people who use it live and some stuff on how long the trip was, et cetera. We haven't really started digging into that data yet, but if it'd be helpful to anyone who's working on a proposal about that money for dealing with the impacts of 75 North, I'm happy to share that and try and work with you.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Ryan, so much. That's why I appreciate a space like this, because, you know, great things like that happen, connection and ideas. So very much appreciate that. Okay, so we have Senator McKinney with us. Please, someone jump in and ask a question. And Senator McKinney, as you look at Mode Shift and think about our mission, you know, think of ways that we can be supportive when it comes to the work, you know, that's being done in East Omaha, even outside of ARPA funding. I often think about with transportation too, funding, especially when it comes to our public transportation. I know some of that does come from the state as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that either. They're always talking about the need for increased funding for transportation, but yeah, anyone please, if you have a question, or Senator McKinney, if you have any other thoughts as well.
I guess I know there've been, I think there's a study going on about you know, doing orbit on 24th Street. How do y'all feel about that? I've been in conversations with people, and some people feel like it's a good idea, but others feel like 24th is too narrow. How do y'all feel?
I feel like widening roads is usually pointless because it just you end up with the same kind of congestion, just more of it. But
I think the need is there, definitely.
Yeah, this is Liz. I guess from Mode Shift, I think Mode Shift as an organization is pretty excited and thinks that we need a north-south BRT line. I don't know, like, I personally don't have strong feelings about which street it needs to be on, but definitely interested to hear more about that. But I think that's a definite need to add to our transit system. Oh, Clyde, you're raising your hand.
Yeah,
Now it's the narrow, oh, the narrow road is, so that would, but if like a part of it were used for specifically for the line, that would be, sorry,
this is Clyde, and I use the Orbit quite often. I just wrote it yesterday. But my big objection to it, it was a large capital investment, and I don't think that it's really been a big improvement over the number 2. And I think the 24 route, which already serves 24th Street, we just need to increase the frequency of service and also provide at every stop a shelter for people, and then also put in predictors that most other cities have on their transit systems at each of the shelters. It tells awaiting passengers when the next bus will be coming.
Yeah.
And or sometimes they call them predictors, but this would be a big enhancement. And the other transit issue, and it's part of the Metro Next wish list, is beefing up the Route 16. That's the one that serves the airport and Northeast Omaha. And right now it only runs a couple trips in the morning and a couple trips in the afternoon, 5 days a week on weekdays. And they need to provide service 7 days a week and at least every 30 minutes on that route. And there's a lot of jobs just at the airport alone, plus all those other industries located like along Abbott Drive, and then also northeast of Abbott Drive when you get up in that area. And we used to have better service when they discontinued some routes that used to go to Fort Street, and Abbott Drive used to be an endpoint for one of the routes. So it's that's another transit improvement that I think is really important and would help job access. There's also some transit improvements needed in South Omaha too. There's some areas that where large employers are not well served by transit.
yeah, like I
want to make
the
sure that before you hold on, Madeline, I want to make sure, Jacqueline, you have your hand up. Did you have something?
No, I talked
Oh,
earlier.
okay.
I'm sorry. I live on a farm, so disregard my animals barking. But the only thing I would have with Orbit, and I don't know if this is any suggestion or if anybody can help me with this, but as a Medicaid broker, I would like to be able to load our members, our Nebraska Medicaid members' cards like remotely and not have, like right now we have to mail tickets to them. And it's, snail mail is pretty, inefficient, as you know. And I've reached out to, the trans dev multiple times. I'm not getting any feedback. So that's one thing I have as far as like the Medicaid side of things, is I really think they should have a or vendor portal, if that makes sense, where we can load their cards for them to go to their doctor's appointments or their dialysis.
Yeah. So like, do you have the UMO card?
Yes. And I want to, I would pay personally for these cards, but it obviously has to go through the system, but they don't yet have a vendor portal where we can load their cards for them.
Right.
That would be my biggest issue with Omaha Metro Transit right now.
Right. Madeline.
yeah, back to me. Like well, first off, earlier I was just kind of confused about the topic of conversation because I'm also like reading something on my computer. But what I'm just discussing here is that he mentioned how like improving South Omaha transportation and stuff. That would be helpful to, that might be helpful for for people in Bellevue and whatnot,
Right.
because there is a, I like recently went and looked at the Metro website, and there is a route to and from Bellevue, but like the one that you mentioned there, it's only it's only at specific times of day.
Mhm.
And that would make it rather difficult for me to use, but
Yeah, that they used to have much more. Actually, I grew up south of Harrison, and the bus used to come into that part of the city, but at that time it was also still Omaha, Nebraska as well. And then when they changed that law and it became Bellevue, then there was something between Omaha and Bellevue. I would say, Senator, regarding the number 24, that's the route that I use most of the time. I don't know. I feel like the orbit, whenever I get on it, there's not a lot of use up and down Dodge Street, at least when I have been on it. And I feel like I agree with Clyde in the sense in that maybe you don't even need something that large, but just more frequent. That's the thing for me, is the frequency of transportation. You know, when I go to Chicago or New York or somewhere, it's almost kind of crazy to me. I'm like, wow, there's a bus like every 3 minutes pulling up here. And it just, sometimes it baffles me, because I'll be at a bus stop sometimes for, you know, depending on the day, you can be there for an hour waiting for the next bus. So to me, it's more so the frequency thing. And I also think that something has to be done to just communicating about transportation. I've talked to Metro about it in the past, MAPA about it in the past, even the chamber, just, you know, encouraging people to even utilize public transportation.
That's
So
what I was, sorry to cut you off. That's what I was gonna say. And you know, mode shift is the right name. I think one thing that, you know, a big thing that's gonna have to happen in Omaha, for example, the discussion about the streetcar. Who's going to use the streetcar? How are you going to get buy-in for people to use the streetcar? What are you got? What incentive is there? So I was just going to ask the group, what approach do you think will work to get, you know, regular constituents or citizens to begin to use public transportation more? Because I think if not, then we will continue to have spotty bus routes and things like that. But how do we shift the thinking?
I want to take a crack at that one, because I think what it is like, first I'm going to answer that, but I agree with Kimara and Clyde about like frequency. I think the thing that is important though also is how the land use planning around it. So that's where like the transit oriented development zoning and that sort of thing. So building also on those bus lines, so there's something to go to, will increase the ridership. And then when you talk about where you place housing density, whether it's apartments or duplexes or however you want to package it, putting that closer to those transit lines as well, 24th Street, north to south, you know, even 16th Street. That way there's more people closer to the transit, and it's designed in a way that is conducive to that. And then of course, just general, you know, making it accessible. Like, I don't understand why Metro hasn't just given everyone a Metro card with $5 on it or something like that, so that you have one and then you can just keep it going, you know. But main thing, at least from my perspective, is the design around those transit lines for sure.
And Brian, you had your hand up as well.
Well, Manny was already going in the same direction that I was. I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about zoning changes while we're doing all this, because I will plug missing middle housing, of course, but we need to be talking about land use. We have a lot of underutilized land, and people aren't building duplexes and triplexes and ADUs on them if we're only zoned R4 and single family houses all the time. So we need to increase that density And a lot of it is missing middle housing by right across all housing zones in the city.
This is Cindy. I'm just going to jump in here. I take Orbit downtown exclusively because I do not like to drive downtown. However, I really miss the number 2 bus, and that is because of the distance. I was able to walk like half a block and hop on number 2 and get downtown. Now I have to cross 72nd Street, and sometimes that is really a hassle because you know, the bus will be coming and the light's green and they get there before I can cross the street. And I mean, they come every 10 minutes, but one of the things is accessibility. So Orbit has lengthened, they took out many stops for the number 2 bus so that it's faster, right? But you have to walk to those places. So my fear or my concern is that if they do decide to absolutely put it on 24th Street, if they start cutting out 24 stops so that it's faster, people will have to walk further, and it's really a deterrent when people, especially if the sidewalks aren't good. Wintertime, are you kidding me? I mean, getting across 72nd Street is like life-changing sometimes. And so I'm really concerned about, I would rather see frequency and reliability and easy access.
I couldn't agree with you more, Cindy. I was on Dodge today and I was gonna take the Orbit, and I started walking. I put in the chat, I have nerve damage. I had a doctor's appointment, and I was like, forget this. It is way too far. I'm not gonna make it in the 3 minutes before the next one comes. If I wait for the next one, I'll probably be late. So I was just like, forget it. I'll just call a Lyft. So yeah, I agree. Senator? Oh, no, Clyde, I'm sorry, yes.
Just following, excuse me, just following up on what Manuel was saying. Rather than sending out fare cards, Jason Rose, who was with Omaha Metro, he met with our transit team several times. And he pointed out that Omaha Metro only gets 12 to 17% of its revenue from fares. And a lot of transit agencies have found that they can really increase ridership by eliminating fares, going what they call fare free. And I think that's what's going to really stimulate streetcar use. Now, another thing, those of us who ride transit, one of the big delays is waiting for people to pay their fares. And especially if you get 3 or 4 people getting on and they fumble around with the phone app to use the new scanning system. And one of the nice things you may remember in the early days of the pandemic, we were fare free here, and it really speeded up. I ride the number 18 all the time, and it really sped up that service because people just got on either door and we would take off. No delays while people got their money out to pay the fare. So I think fare free is a good way to go in Omaha.
I want to bring up something else, and Manny's done a really good job of this in North Omaha, but I've been working a little bit in South Omaha with some of the trail system as far as the, well, it's now, you know, it's the Papio, whatever. I don't even know what they call the trail if it's not by the Papio, but the trail system, the trail transportation system in Omaha East is horribly maintained, and it's a bone of contention with me because, well, I live near 72nd and Dodge, so I'm kind of in the middle of some stuff, but I really feel like the trail system needs to be improved, better maintenance, and also expanded use for people. Heartland B-Cycle has really been good at putting in more bicycle stations, but some of the trail system is so poorly maintained, I'm just appalled. And so I just don't know if there's something that anyone has been looking at as far as that goes.
So as far as the trail system, there's been high level, not completely in depth, but conversations about the trail system, because the trail system and I can't speak for South Omaha because I'm not aware of it, but I'm sure there's probably issues in South Omaha too. But in North Omaha, the trail from, I believe, downtown to kind of the northern side of North Omaha, kind of more so in Senator Wayne's district, is pretty much cut off. And we've had conversations about how do we find a way to reconnect the trail system as a whole so people could get from, what is that, MP Dodge Park all over by the river back to downtown without having to hop on the street and just go through the trail. So we've had a little conversation about that, but not, it hasn't went to where like it's a definite or anything, but we had conversations about it.
I'll just
Thanks.
chime in a bit on that, just because I know that was it the NRD, I think it was, is working on some small connections. It's not going to make all those connections that you're talking about to connect, but they're doing some small studies and lining up some potential projects on that. But yeah, it's just piecemeal right now.
Okay. All righty, well, some good conversation. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, I am going to pass it off to Liz. Unfortunately, I had a death in my family, and so I have a funeral tomorrow, and I actually have a relative that is coming to my house right now. And so I apologize that I have to hop off, everyone. But before I go, I know everyone's going to give their thank yous, but I have to give a thank you to my friend, Senator McKinney. Thank you for always making yourself available to come and talk to people. This is what all of our elected officials should do. You know, communicating with people, being able to answer questions, and you always show up and show out, as I say. So I just appreciate you so much. And I really hope that you take advantage of this relationship with Mode Shift. I think there was a lot of great conversation today. And I think that this could be a really great relationship, both helpful for you and helpful for us and the work that we do as well. So I just hope that this continues. And I hope that we can all connect again in the future. And I want to say bye to everyone. Before I do, I see John has his hand up though. And I'm going to hop off, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Kimara.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
That wasn't a hand up. I was just clapping. I was applauding her statements.
Cool. Are there other folks with questions?
Clyde.
Oh, Clyde, I see you.
Sorry to have so much to say, but I'm also a convener for OTOC's Environmental and Sustainability Action Team. And we were really disappointed a couple weeks ago when OPPD the board voted to delay the conversion of the North Omaha Power Station from coal to natural gas. However, they did get something added to the resolution saying that they are open to mitigation. As you know, the burning of coal at that power station is the metropolitan area's largest source of particulate matter. And that results in a lot of the North Omaha area is a hot spot for asthma. And the second biggest emitter of particulate matter are diesel powered vehicles. And a lot of the diesel exhaust comes from school buses. And although the EPA has a school bus electrification program, it requires local match. And so what I think would be a good project, and I worked 11 years after I retired from Union Pacific as a school bus driver aide for OPS, mainly hauling special needs students, is to help OPS student transportation convert to at least get started electrifying their school bus fleet and assigning those buses to North Omaha schools. And to help cut down these particulate emissions in the North Omaha.
No, I think that's a good idea. I had saw something, because I'm always on YouTube looking at what other people are doing across the country, but it was a few school districts that have purchased a lot of electric school buses. And I know the one barrier that is obvious is they talk about, how expensive it is. But I do think that, it's something to be explored and executed. I know the issue probably with OPS will be who will take ownership of the buses, because they contract with, what is the School Transportation of America. So who will be taking on the ownership, or how would that work? But I think it's an amazing idea, and I do think it should happen because of, what you've stated as far as like the power plant, the fact that kids are even riding on buses with diesel buses and exhaust and things like that. I remember being a kid standing on a bus stop and a bus would pass and you get all the black smoke and those type of things, and just thinking about the effects of that over a long period of time. So I think it's an amazing idea. I think we're going to also have to begin to explore, because a lot of the auto industry is going electric. What does that look like in Omaha, and how can we make it work as well? When you talk about the increase need for charging stations and things like that, I know the feds are putting a lot of dollars in for that. So how can we take advantage of that also? So if OPS wants to get on board with that and we could find a way to make it work, I would be all for it, because I think it's definitely needed.
Well, more than half of the school buses are owned by OPS, and they're handling the special needs like the handicap wheelchair buses and the little small buses. Those are all OPS owned buses. They work out of the station up there at 72nd and
Okay.
Spalding. So, but the big problem, you're right, they are more expensive, but then you don't have to buy diesel fuel to put in it. So long term, the expense is probably equal or less. And I think that we need to get OPPD and other agencies to help fund, like you got to put in charging infrastructure and things like that, and maybe help provide the matching money that to get this federal EPA school bus money.
Yep. No, I agree with you, and it's definitely some conversations that should be taking place. My biggest gripe with being a Nebraskan and an Omaha resident, I always feel like we're slow to the party when it comes to things like this. And I always look around, or you travel places and you see different cities doing so many amazing things around transportation. I'm like, why don't we have a high rail system, or, those type of things? Like, why not? Like, do we want to be small Omaha, or do we want to be the big city in Nebraska? And it kind of feel like we're stuck in the middle sometimes, and people are slow to change. But I do think those type of things should be explored, because not even the US, when you look at European countries, a lot of them are doing some great things. So I'm always on board with innovating our transportation system. And if I could help in any way, I'm down to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Clyde. I think that is a great idea. So hopefully, I don't know if you or Sierra Club or OTOC or others can follow up with OPS and try to, but that's a great idea for these funds. Other folks have questions?
Yeah, I have a few comments. So I agree with Senator McKinney especially about looking at other cities and the airport in particular. I feel like if a city has a great way to get from the airport to downtown, it's a big plus for the city. So I think we could work there. Like Denver has a great train now that's pretty new, and other cities, like if we start comparing ourselves. And it's kind of hard to walk or bike between downtown and the airport. So I think some kind of, like the bus system was mentioned, something would be great for that. Otherwise, we're basically stuck with Ubers or cars for that. And then I also wanted to comment on, I know free rides are great, but I do have one downside on that. I've noticed like when the Orbit was free, I thought it was a little less unsafe or less safe, especially at night. Like people were riding a lot that were taking the free rides. Also saw that in Denver, they have the free downtown bus, and it's didn't seem as safe. You've got, so maybe an alternative way would be you could have kids get free rides, or teachers, or some system like that instead of everyone. Just a thought there, but yeah, I think, and I love the idea of the Lincoln to Omaha train. So would love to see that. Yeah. Thank you.
And we do have schools, students that are OPS students, I think, do have free bus.
Oh, is that permanent? Or?
I'm not sure if that's permanent, and I'm not sure if it's, I don't think it's actually publicly funded. Isn't it a foundation funding that? Buffett or someone?
I'm not sure, but I probably would assume so.
But yeah, I think it's great. And I think it's been extended. And so I think it's semi-permanent.
I would ask a quick question and like apologize if I'm intruding, but so with the medical transportation for Medicaid, we do see like a really downshift in the school months of like our providers not showing up, and it's because they have school contracts. So I'm trying to think of a way to, because they're going to take that school contract over a medical appointment. So I'm trying to think of a way to kind of negate that, or how to just make everybody work harmoniously. Just throwing that out there. If anybody has any ideas, would love to hear it. Because I know the school contracts are big money and they're getting paid more than medical appointments, but would like to hear if anybody has any input on that.
Anybody?
Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, no, maybe so.
I don't know if any of us know enough about that topic. I don't think so.
No, not really. Okay.
Sorry. It's a good question.
That's why I want to get more involved with you, because I want to have you guys, like, I want to be able to use public transportation more for medical appointments for Medicaid, and I want it to be more reliable, and them not have to, have to walk down the street, or, a lot of my members are in wheelchairs, and like we were talking earlier, some of the sidewalks aren't conducive to wheelchairs, so they can't get to the bus stop. So there's multiple different things, and these are conversations we can have later.
Yeah, no, sidewalks in Omaha are rough. I mean, they're hard for me as like an able-bodied,
yeah,
relatively like fit person to figure out my way around. I mean, cars are always parked blocking the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Snow always covers the sidewalks. They get icy. It's definitely difficult, and something that we want to keep talking about.
So is there any, I kind of forgot the sidewalk talk. I know the senator said like he doesn't just want to pour money into it, but like, so what is the thought that goes into the sidewalk process? I guess I'd like to know. And anybody tell me.
I'll just give my 2 cents is that the city has money too, and they should be doing it.
They should be doing it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, technically, the law says that it's the property owner's responsibility to upkeep sidewalks, right? But Omaha supposedly has a fund that will help people who can't afford to do that, to update their sidewalks or fix them or whatever. But somebody told me a couple years ago, no one had ever accessed those funds. So I think that means the city is not doing a good job educating people about
exactly
the access to those funds, and like needs to be out there telling people and getting them out there, because obviously a lot of the sidewalks need help. I know in some places, I think in Dundee now, like around the elementary school, the city has told people who own property there, like, we are upgrading these sidewalks and like you can either do it yourself or we're gonna just do it and bill you for it. So the city can do that and does do that sometimes, but you know, they
And
don't.
I
do
guess
that very
that's
often.
kind of my question. Like, I've had a couple instances where, like, I have a dialysis patient that can't get out of his house because of the sidewalks. And I will go take pictures and I will send them to somebody at like the ADA and be like, hey, this has to happen. And then they end up, you know, paying for it. But yeah, if it didn't have to be a case by case basis and it was just more, you know, widespread, that, you know, a wheelchair or a bariatric can get down a sidewalk, would be awesome.
Yeah, Cindy, I know you've worked on getting the sidewalks to be like officially transportation labeled, or you've done a little bit of work. You don't want to talk about that.
Well, I think Michael Kakowski also said this, that we have asked the city to codify that sidewalks are modes of transportation. If you look up modes of transportation in the Muni codes, it comes up as one of those petty vehicles from the College World Series.
Right.
Many other cities surrounding us, Council Bluffs, Lincoln, Kansas City, and Des Moines all have their sidewalks classified as modes of transportation. Omaha is verbal in that, but they are not following that, and they don't have it written. And so that is one of the biggest things we need to have happen, I believe.
Yes, I agree.
In order to make people be able, okay, so I'll just tell you an example. 84th and Center. It's not east, it's west, but all of the ADA tactile plates have been, whatever those are called, have been removed because they've fallen out, and there's deep gouges in the concrete right there. So I talked to the sidewalk person about that, and he says, well, you know, we're waiting for another project to happen so that we don't have to redo them if we do them now. And so he said, it may take 3 years. You know, 3 years does not work for someone who's in a wheelchair.
So I guess that's my issue is, and I'm sorry, I'm joining like randomly, but why is Omaha not ADA compliant as far as sidewalks? Do they not have to be?
Somebody here might have a better understanding of this than I do, but I mean, the federal law applies to them. I think that there must be some loopholes around funding, because the city, you know, has some funding and does some work on it every year. And I mean, I guess somebody would have to sue the city and say that they are violating the law. And I'm not familiar enough with the law to know how good of a lawsuit that would be or not, but I don't know if anybody else has more familiarity with that.
Well, actually, I think we've had better luck with the city. For example, Schiff was involved in several of the rebuilding the bridges over 680. And in the case of Pacific and Blondo, we got the city to put in really good sidewalks on those new bridges. But when we worked with the Nebraska DOT, like on Dodge Street Expressway, getting over 680, and Maple Street getting over 680, they ignored us. They did not, like at Maple Street, when I used to work on the school bus, I had a route that went over Maple Street, and there were pedestrians having to walk in the traffic lanes because there's no sidewalks over 680 on Maple Street. And, you know, it's just, so I think we need a state level mandate on that sidewalks need to be a mode of transportation and force the Nebraska DOT to provide for that.
I would completely support that. I mean, I know you guys are just Omaha, but do you have the outreach for a statewide, you know, call on that? I just know that's a huge thing for a lot of my like dialysis patients that can't get to therapy, is
Yeah.
the sidewalks in
I
Omaha.
mean, we could ask Senator McKinney what he thinks. We have worked in the past with Senator Wayne to pass legislation around the Regional Transportation Authority, which Metro is going to become and be able to potentially expand. But yeah, I don't know if the senator has any thoughts on state action around making sidewalks transportation.
I'm not sure if anybody has explored it, but I could reach out to Senator. I could talk to Senator Wayne, since he's on the chair of the Urban Affairs Committee, and see if anybody has brought that to their attention, and see whether somebody's introduced something in the past or whether it's something to explore as far as introducing a bill. Or sometimes you don't even need a bill, but sometimes you need a bill to force an entity to do their job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Ryan pointed out in the chat that there are other statewide groups like Bike Walk Nebraska that would probably partner around something like that. So
I have to get off, but I wanted to tell everyone I've definitely enjoyed the conversation. I'm willing to come back at a later date if you guys want to talk about something else as well. Always feel free to reach out to me. I'll try to make some time as best as possible. And if you have any further questions around ARPA or any transportation related questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll try to get those answered.
amazing. Thank you so much, Senator McKinney, for joining us and all the work you do in the legislature.
No problem. Thank you all.
Thank you. Go Bikes.
Right.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I think we'll maybe wrap it up with, if people have any final announcements or anything. I think the bike team is going to have a meeting for the first time in a while on Saturday, September 10th at 10 a.m. at coffee shop in Exarban. I can't remember what it's called at the moment, but I can look that up and put it in the chat.
Roast?
Yeah. Thanks. And then I think walkability. Cindy, you're from walkability. Avon already left. I don't know if you remember upcoming. And there's a meeting on what, the second Wednesday? Second Wednesday. I think it's 7, but if you're on Slack, we'll post those, and we'll post them on Facebook and on social and stuff. And we'll follow up with an email. I think everybody's on our email list. Any other announcements on stuff people want to share?
A transit team, it would be the 4th Tuesday.
Anything else? Last call. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining. I think we had a great discussion with Senator McKinney, and hopefully have some good follow-up items around sidewalks as transportation and more. So we'll stay in touch about those. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.